talk about kind of the reasons for why some of this stuff is the way it is, but it's important that you understand what goes into the formula. There are going to be some questions that you may have about why does that go, and why is that the way it is. Some of those I can answer for you, and some of those we're going to go, because that's what Congress is the formula, and that's what went into it, and it was a decision that was made for a number of political reasons, and it is the way it is. How many of you have done a hand count before? Taken a FAFSA and then used a piece of paper and written the numbers down and come up with the EFC? Show of hands for everybody. Anyone? No.
Sarah has.
Sarah, I'm so sorry, I missed your hand. All right, Sarah, come on up. No, I'm kidding. I was gonna let you do it. So, this is something that's really important for you to know. Depending on what system you're using, whether it's Banner or PeopleSoft or PowerFades or whatever your school system is, it's doing this for you. But the reason we want to talk about it and have you understand it is so that when the family says, how am I supposed to pay this and my rent? You'll know. Mm-hmm. Because that's a common question that we get. Well, don't you know X, Y, Z? You'll know what we already considered, why we consider it, if we haven't considered it, why we don't, and when a PJ is appropriate. Because if you don't get this, you can talk about PJs. But what you don't want to do is do a professional judgment to make an allowance for something that's already in our formula. Right? That's double counting. So it's important that you know what goes into it. And I do apologize for the nature of the content because no one likes to sit around and talk about methodology. Wait, does anyone like to sit around and talk about methodology? If you do, it's okay. It's just not most of our passions. So, our objectives. So we want to talk about basically what I said, so you understand what's happening in these formulas. We're going to talk about federal methodology almost entirely. We will do a brief section on institutional methodology toward the end. And it's actually really interesting. We won't go into the details of institutional methodology like we do federal methodology, mostly because does anyone here, besides the folks who are here from Duke, use institutional methodology, use a profile? Where are you from? You're from Elon, that's right. You would, I remember folks. But it's an interesting point of contrast because it's a totally different way of looking at aid and how much money people need. And we'll tell you why we do that, and it'll help you answer some questions too. And we're actually, once we get through the talking part, we're going to do some case studies. And when we get to that stage, I'm going to break you up into groups so that you can do some group work on this rather than sitting at your desk individually and just trying to write down the numbers. You can help each other out and have some discussion about it as well. And then we'll come back together as a group and make sure you get the right answers. I mentioned in the last presentation we would talk a little bit about the history of financial aid. And so this slide is in 1992, so the early 90s, they decided that for the following award year, everybody was going to have federal methodology. It's when we got the formulas that we do, everything that you use now, in my mind, is not that old, right? So hopefully everyone in here is old enough to think that's not that old. But I don't think it's pretty new in the grand scheme of things, considering people have been going to college for a long time. Before that is where we get a little bit more of the history. This is basically the same aid year that we split in some directions, and some schools said federal methodology, and everybody that gets federal money went that way. And some schools went with institutional methodology. And that's what some of the schools are using now. And the reason they did that, you'll see as we talk about what the differences are between the two. But they interact, and some of the changes that you've seen in federal methodology in recent years are a result of spillover from the way institutions that use institutional methodology have been doing it used to. People had fairly similar methodology before this called consensus methodology. And there was something called uniform methodology, and it goes all the way back around the late 60s, early 70s is when we really started talking about financial and higher education. And so this is fairly recent. We use it, the federal methodology, we all know what we use it for. We got to get Pell, we got to get our state grants, we got to get student loans. We're all using FAFSA to do that. This is an important part, and this is a piece that's going to be different from institutional methodology, but the Bureau of Labor Statistics uses budget levels updated annually based on the Consumer Price Index. Here's what this means. Bureau of Labor Statistics came up with something, and it was back in 1967, I believe. And it was the market basket. You ever hear anybody talk about the market basket? It's a group of consumer goods, milk, bread, things people buy, and how much they cost. And every year, the Bureau of Labor Statistics goes in and they update them. And they say, with inflation, here are the household goods a person needs to buy. And inflation's been about X number of dollars, and that's what this Consumer Price Index is. And they put those together and they say, okay, here's the new amount. So now it costs this much more this year, or this much less, if you've got deflation, to buy those same goods. What I want you to think about in the back of your head is this is something that started with a basket of goods in the late 60s. And it's not been updated since that time except for inflation. How many of the things that you use on a daily basis have changed since that time? Nobody then had to have internet connections. Nobody then had to have a cell phone. We had a regular phone. You didn't, we're buying different things. And so this is probably one of the more artificial pieces of our formula, and you're going to see it come into play on something called the income protection allowance, which is that part when you earn your money, you don't have any discretion over it. Like, you've got to buy food. You've got to have a roof over your head. You've got to do these things. So we're going to protect a portion of everybody's income for these items, and what we choose to protect is what's in this thing from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's what this is telling you. So when they're saying, how do I pay my rent? Well, we've protected a part of your income for your house. And we'll talk more about that in more detail, but where we got the numbers on how to do that started way back when with this Bureau of Labor Statistics piece. There's several different formulas. So when you start a FAFSA, has everybody filled out a FAFSA? Has everybody filled out a FAFSA this year? Has everybody filled out a FAFSA in the last 2 years? Since it went online? I mean, it's been online for longer than 3 years, but it's changed considerably in the last few years. There is a website that you can go to that is a FAFSA demo specifically for financial aid professionals, and you can log in. We can give you the login information for that if your school does not have it, and you can go in, and I would encourage you to fill it out so that when your students call and they've got a question, I'm answering blah, 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 you know what they're talking about and what it looks like on the screen. So this changed quite a bit over the years. Even if you filled it out 3 years ago or so, it looks a lot different online than it used to. They revamped their website. So when they go in, you've got dependent students. Everybody understands about who a dependent student is. We talked about that already this week, right? Independent students. And then you've got independent students who are married and got dependents other than a spouse. Or maybe they're not married, but they have a dependent. The simplified formula and the auto zero EFC. Have you talked about this before? Are you familiar with these words? Okay. We'll get to more of it. We're going to kind of walk through them one by one. But just so you know, not everybody gets presented with the same questions on the FAFSA. Depending on the information you start entering, you might not get asked a set of stuff because they're like, gosh, your income is so low, I bet you don't have any assets. It just skips you. That's what the simplified formula will do for you. So in 1965, the Higher Education Act, which we've just been renewing, and then delaying renewing with extensions for that many years, decided here's what need is. It's our cost of attendance. We all know how clearly that's defined for every school, because we all get to send out the books. But anyway, it's your cost of attendance minus whatever the FAFSA spits out as the expected family contribution, and that's how much money you need to go to school. Pretty simple, you think? Now, what makes up that number that comes out of the FAFSA? That's what we're here to talk about. I talked about if we protect a part of your income, it's consumer price, market basket, you gotta pay your rent, you gotta buy your food, you gotta have clothes, and the baby's gotta have shoes. So all of that stuff is protected, and whatever's left over after you take care of those things, that's called your available income. Then, however much they save from your assets, you can contribute, depending on how much you got cash, saving, checking, investment. And we divide that directly by the number of students you're trying to send to college at once. So whatever your EFC is, suddenly you got 2 kids, you divide by 2, you got 3 kids, you divide by 3. Because you only have that much money, you didn't get more just because you had more kids. And so they split that evenly across those children. Here's one family, they can only pay this much, and you gotta split that across all those kids. Now, for sake of argument, one of the things that I will bring up is contrast to institutional methodologies. We don't look at it that way. And there's a reason. Anybody know what that reason is? Other than Elon guy? So, what are the principles behind what we're doing? We're trying to be fair, right? We're trying to be equitable. You've got a family, and they got 3 kids. And they are 4 years apart each. They're going to put all those kids through college. Then you've got family 2 over here. They got 3 kids. They are triplets. They're going to put them all through school at once. That family pays 1 EFC and puts all 3 kids through school. The other family who's got them spaced incorrectly is going to pay that EFC 3 times. The same family, same income, same profile, live next door to each other, and at the end of their kids, they are a lot poorer than the family who knew how to have their children. Just send them home. And so when you look at it that way, there's a flaw in how we think about putting kids through school. Because we're looking at the assumption of federal methodology is we take the family as they present to us at that moment. That moment, what can you pay for their assets and income? And so with that assumption comes this dichotomy between these 2 families. They're actually being treated very inequitably, even though they have the same number of kids, same amount of money. And the reason we do that is, do you know how hard it is and how much information we have to collect to look at a family and their history and then try to calculate their future earnings potential and decide how much they ought to pay just based on anything other than how they present to us at the moment? You'd have to collect years of history of tax returns. You'd have to kind of average out what their earnings were. Did they have a consistent uptick? Did it go down? Does this family look different from that one? It's the easiest thing. We don't have a mechanism for calculating other than, hey, you filed today, this is how much money you got, this is how many kids you got, this is what we're doing. The balance of that in institutional methodology, they only changed it a little, is they take whatever the number of college is, instead of, let's say you got 2 kids in college, and it be 50%, multiply times 0.5, right? You got 2 kids. Institutional methodology multiplies that times 0.6. So you actually pay a little more than your EFC. So it's a reduction in how much you have to pay for that kid, but it's not cut straight in half. And that's to try to compensate a little bit to level the playing field between those families who didn't space their kids so that they're in school at the same time. So that those families, when graduating, are a little bit closer to equity in terms of where they are. Now, why they didn't do it the other way and give them a greater allowance, right, and be kinder, so that they're both a little better off at the end. Probably had a lot to do with institutional budgets. But it's something to think about when you think about what's fair. When you hear a family say, I got more kids coming through, they really do. And we're not really thinking about that in a way that's always equitable. So part of my goal with this methodology discussion is to get you to not only understand how we do this, but why, honestly, some of the questions that your families have are valid. So that you can have some of that empathy when they tell you it's hard. Because it is. I want you, just as an assignment, when you leave this, go fill out a FAFSA with your own information in. Your own information and see what your EFC comes out to be. And you see whether or not you think that's fair. Can you pay that money it's expected of you right now? The majority of us, I would say, no, you cannot. And you'll see why, but you'll also see why that might be fair. Okay. Everybody still with me? Okay, so let's talk about income a little bit. I said our available income is after all these protections. Let's talk about what those protections are a little bit. So we start with all the income that you have. Taxable income, so it comes in on your taxes. Everybody familiar with verification? Did you do your verification session already? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you know that V6 group with the untaxed income and all that stuff that we're trying to capture? We want to know what that is too, any income available to families. And then whatever, we have some exclusions, I've alluded to those, we're going to go into detail about them. And the allowances, and that's what comes out as your available income. So, the details about what comes out of your income. Untaxed income, payments to pension plans. And you probably know some of this from the verification section, right? What's included in untaxed income. For the B6 folks, it either shows up on the FAFSA or you're capturing it on that, so I won't spend a ton of time on it. Interestingly though, what parents will say is, you mean I'm not supposed to retire? I thought retirement was protected. And it's interesting, what's already in retirement, so it's already in their 401k, we're blind to it. We don't look at it. We're like, we know you gotta retire, you already put that in there. Why do we count as income stuff that they're setting aside for their retirement?
Well, they can stop their retirement contributions and put it into their kids' college.
They can stop their retirement contribution, put it in their kids' college, and they'll say, I'm supposed to, most of them are getting close to retirement. They've got a kid old enough to go to school, some of them anyway. You want me to stop doing that? And it's about equity, right? So you've got the family who makes a certain level of income and doesn't contribute anything to retirement, they can't. Social Security is their hope and prayer. And then you've got the family who electively chose, or not electively, some employers mandate that you set aside for the state to do. But that family is in a stronger financial position than the family who doesn't have the money to do it. And so we can't look at them like they're the same family. So we're trying to level the playing field a little bit on this. And so we say, yes, whether you're mandated or not, at the end of this 4 years, you're going to be in a lot better shape than this family who has no retirement at all, is just going to live on Social Security. So we need to count that to level the playing field so that we're comparing apples to apples here. So that's why we count it, but you'll get that question. Same thing with IRA, deductions, AOGH payments. People know what these are? So if you're self-employed most of the time, you can't get it out of your W-2s because you're paying yourself. You might not give yourself a W-2, depending on the kind of business you have. And so they set up these kinds of plans. It's the same thing. It shows up on the tax return. If you're getting child support from somebody else, that shows up. If you have untaxed portions of IRA distributions, the caution with that is what we often see in professional judgment, which is when they roll them over. Is everybody familiar with rollovers? Right, so maybe you switched jobs or you decided to change your plan and you just moved it from this kind of retirement to this kind of retirement, but you didn't get any of the money. That shows up on your tax return. If they do data retrieval, it automatically pulls in and says, you got $100,000 in untaxed income, and their EFC will be astronomical. But they didn't get any of that money. It's all in retirement. It was in retirement. If they do data retrieval, their EFC will be falsely high, and you can then go in as a PJ and pull that back out. And you'll know if they did it, it'll say rollover on the tax return most of the time. If it doesn't say rollover, they can actually give you the 1099 and it'll tell you if there was a rollover. Housing, food, other living allowances paid to military and clergy. You see it a lot with clergy. They have a parsonage, and so the housing is paid for. That's untaxed income to them. Because another family, remember how I said we're protecting a part of their income to help them pay rent? So if they don't have, if they're not having to pay that, we've got to add that back as untaxed income if that's being given to them, because we're protecting a part that they don't need. But it doesn't happen for the military. The Congress has relatively recently made a law that says that we don't use military housing allowances as untaxed income anymore. Veterans benefits like that are not education. So we're not talking yellow ribbon or the VA education bills. We're just talking disability, death, that kind of thing. Other untaxed income, that's the catch-all. Sometimes they'll just put a number in there, but most of the time nobody tells you about untaxed income. You can't. But if they do, you can. This is what's not considered untaxed income. We've got all of these, so I'll just kind of go through them real quick. The aid that we're giving that goes towards their education, earned income credits, a lot of those credits that happen at the very end of your taxes, so people who don't pay any taxes and then get money back still, we don't count that as income to them on FM. And institutional methodology, we do. We look at that and we say that was money paid to them by the federal government. It's untaxed income. But for federal purposes, it's not. I mentioned military housing allowance, benefits, foreign income exclusions, those kinds of things.